Hello everybody, and what we're going to do now is we're going to whiz through what we worked on yesterday and get our Revit model from Revit and import it into an Unreal scene, change the materials, add an HDRI background, add a few lights and include a sequencer. So without further ado, let's get cracking. I'm in Revit, as you can see. I'm in a 3D view, could be any one of these 3D views, and I've gone to the add-ins tab at the top and I'm going to select the export 3D view from Revit using the Unreal Datasmith, and I'm going to drop those onto the desktop just for convenience. Pew. Not going to take too long, as you can see. There we go, done already. Fantastic, we have exported that model. How quick was that? Over in Unreal, I have opened the launcher, the Epic Games launcher, and clicked on Unreal Engine. I'm going to select the 4.253, which is its current most recent version, and launch that software. From this Create New Project, I'm going to choose Architecture, Engineering and Construction, and I'm going to choose the ArcViz template with starter content. I'm going to give it a suitable name, Revit House, Revit Project, and as you can see it's somewhere sensible with a lot of disk space so I can save it and do a lot of mods to this. Watch the thing load. This can take some time depending on your machine and the complexity of the project. Close the message log, and here we can see we've got the template folder ready to go. And you can play around in here for a bit if you want, but I'm going to go straight down to the bottom left corner, expand this content browser. I'm going to go to the ArcViz project, levels, right click, level, Revit project. Let's just rename that so it's actually typed correctly. Open that up, and I'm going to use the Datasmith template icon at the top here, Datasmith icon, navigate to my desktop, select the Revit file there, drop it in the levels, and so I've navigated through the levels, and I'm only going to use the geometry and materials. I'm going to deselect lights, cameras, animations. Fantastic, okay. So now, as you can see in the world outliner on the right hand side, we actually have the object in here. We can't see it because it's miles away, but also it's very dark in here. Just bumped into it. So what we need to do is open a light or drag in a HDRI backdrop. So let's go for the HDRI option first. And there we go. It's in, fantastic. Nice and lit using the light from the HDRI scene. And in order to get shadows, we want to actually drop in a directional light. So this doesn't really matter where this actor is placed. As you can see, the light will be coming in a straight line in the direction of that little node there. We can change the values of the intensity, we can change the source angle, and we can then go around and start experimenting with the scene. The first thing I'm going to do here is change the exposure of the scene. The reason we change the exposure of the scene is because we want full control of the exposure when we are using our cameras and our exports. So to do that, it's really quick. Edit, Project Settings, and in the search bar at the top we choose Exposure. We deselect it, and then in the little icon at the top of the viewport here called Lit, I'm going to just go all the way to the bottom, choose Game Settings, deselect Game Settings, and now we have full control of the exposure within the cameras. Again, that means that when we are doing walkthroughs and we go around the building, room to room, we aren't going to go from like an outdoor scene where it's bright into the room here and then it's going to go pitch black because of the exposure. we can control all of that. A few things we need to check, however. We do have a bit of clipping here where we've got two materials overlapping. The quickest way we do anything with that is to select it and delete, and we make sure that's not affected anything significantly around the building. But when it comes to adding our own materials from, let's say, the starter content, let's give this a silly material like grass. You know, that's not going to affect the object above, which it does in this case. So I'll undo that. What we need to do here then is actually add our own piece of geometry to cover this ceiling. And the way that I'm going to do that is using the basic geometry and plane. I'm just going to drag and drop that in. Only get a tiny little plane. I'm going to position that sort of in the center. Using the gumball, and I'm going to use the keyboard W, E and R. W is move, E is rotate, R is scale, and I can position this sort of to be in the right position to create my new ceiling. Okay, what does it look like underneath? So you can see that I can actually see through this surface of mesh. What I need to do is rotate this 180 degrees. Now, I can't see through it. Let's make sure that's in the right place. So it needs to be scaled back a little bit. And I'll move that into position. And I might want to move the scale factor of the move, adjust it to maybe 1. That way I get a little bit more control over its position. There we go. And let's move it to the right. Perfect. Let's make it a bit longer. Okay, so it doesn't particularly matter at this level that we are at if we are 100% accurate. We just need to make sure that things look good when we export them as a video. Yeah, okay, let's see how that looks. There is a bit of gap there. We could spend a bit more time on there stressing out about that. We can give it a new material. Let's give it a basic wall material. And at the moment, I've got these preview icons everywhere telling me that the lighting, when I dropped in the HDRI in this light, is now affecting the way that Unreal reflects shadows, well, reflects light to create shadows and reflections. So what I need to do, and I've got an error message at the top here, lights need to be rebuilt. I've got 523 objects that need rebuilding. We do that by going to the Build tab at the top. And again, this can take us a period of time depending on your hardware. Try not to really do much whilst it's building. You know, currently I'm using 20 gigs of RAM and 10% of my CPU. So it's not too bad, and when this goes up to 100%, well, as it clocks up to 100%, I imagine we'll see a little bit more of an increase in my CPU usage there. So again, this does, at certain times, like, you know, spinning around, navigating your 3D geometry is not too taxing on the hardware. It is when it comes to exporting the videos, it is when it's building the lights, because this is all a CPU and GPU intensive task. You know, my GPU is at 25%. I think I've only got 6 gigs of memory. Oh, 40 gigs of GPU memory. Look at that. I don't know why it says, yeah, 8 gigs there, dedicated GPU. So I'm using 6 of my 8 gigs. So again, if you're looking at a graphics card, you need something pretty beefy to run this kind of software. CPU, 100%. So if you are using a laptop with a couple of cores, you know, this is going to take a period of time for you to complete. Close that. Hopefully all of our previews have gone. Yes, and our reflections look a lot better, even on the Revit materials. The lights here, we did say, if you remember, not to import lights. Now what this is actually is a material which is emulating a light source. It's called an emissive light. I'm going to turn my camera speed down to 2 whilst I'm inside playing around. A bit more control. And that bloom is crazy. That lens flare is a little bit over the top. What we could do, we'll just inspect this object by selecting it. As you can see, I've got it selected in the world outliner. And then if I go down to the bottom right, we've got the details of this object. And here in this window, in this tab, we've got materials. What I'm going to do here is see we've got RNT material, a white high luminescence material, and an anodized black material. So I'm going to assume that this white high luminescence is actually this emissive material. And because I'm just going to fake it for the moment, I'm going to drag in from my materials library in the starter content here on the left hand side a basic material to override that high luminescence. And you know, it does a bit of a horrible job, but it's stopping me having a bit of a headache whilst I navigate around this scene. You know, one thing we didn't look at was building our own material. It's a real straightforward process, and we'll do that again. Maybe next week we can build a material quite quickly. I also want to replace the glass inside these curtain walls. So what I've done here is I've just selected the curtain wall, and you can see again I've selected it in my world outliner. Just by clicking on it, it highlights it in the world outliner. Go down to the details, and one of the first windows in this, it kind of starts to show you all the components inside that curtain wall. I can make that a little bit bigger, and you can see I've got all the rectangular primitive shapes that create the object, and I've also got the single planes that create the panes of glazing. So with those selected, I can make that window a bit smaller again. And once again, just like with the light fitting, I can see the materials that represent the glass. And this is a Revit material. And what I'm going to do is replace it with the M glass, the basic material glass from the starter content. And a few things have changed. Straight away you can see it's a lot more translucent. There is no longer the blue tint, and it will react very nicely with our HDRI source and any lights that we drop in the scene. Another thing we need to check here is the HDRI itself. In the session we did actually play around with the HDRI, and in the starter content, if you go to the HDRI folder, you can see we've got our HDRI file, and if I select the HDRI object, you can see that in the HDRI backdrop it is that same file that we are linking to. And the way that I changed that was I went to HDRI Haven, and I chose a scene that was more representative to what I want that to be reflected on. So again, you've got all sorts of things, indoors, outdoors, studios, nature, that kind of a thing, urban settings. So what I'm going to do here is choose a night scene. A couple of these are a bit OTT for my liking. Let's just choose the golf course, and I will download that in 4K. As you can see, I've played with a few already today, and that's just going to be in the downloads folder. Here all I'm going to do is navigate to that folder and drop that Moonlit HDRI into the empty space of my HDRI folder there, and drag that over to replace the scene. So a few things have happened. Now the building isn't really responding too great to this HDRI change, and what I need to do is change the exposure of the objects itself, of the scene. So what I can do is go to Edit, Editor Preferences, Exposure. Okay, no, it's the wrong window. I can go to Edit, Project Settings, Exposure. Oh, did I already do that? Fantastic. Okay. So now what I can do is drop in a directional light. Let's drop in a directional light. Got the light in there. Fantastic. And I can play around with the intensity maybe. Bring that down. dusk scene to reflect the HDRI. Maybe the HDRI is not the best. Who's to say? Change the scale. Again, of what it really looks like. What it really looks like when we are in the building is what matters. Okay, it's not too bad, is it? Okay, another thing we might want to play around with here is dropping in a few of our own lights and a few materials. So let's change the material. So there's a few ways we can do that again. We can navigate to the Starter Content Material folder, and we can quite quickly and simply drag and drop materials onto the meshes, the mesh planes, the objects. For example, I could put in a metal chrome. Or I could select the object and I can navigate to that material inside the object properties, and I can drop the material onto the object. Okay. Something like the table and chairs, it might be worthwhile downloading a new set of objects from another website or even the Unreal Marketplace. That way you'll get better geometries, higher quality models as well, because these are pretty awful. Okay, see that fantastic workmanship on that object. Okay, so we dropped a few materials in, and again for this kitchen counter, if I drop a material on, let's just put gold on, you know, the whole thing changes. There is a way we can break the surfaces down, so you can have a different surface on here to the cabinet fronts, or you might want to just keep it all as is, with a bit of walnut carcasses and cabinetry. That'd be quite fancy. And we could put in maybe a polished marble countertop. Look at that, it's getting there. For this tap, we could put the chrome on. Okay, because that's quite small, we might actually want to navigate to this object here and drop in the material onto the object. This guy is having a great time. Let's see, is there a black? There is no black. Let's go for a what should we go for that? Metal. Just go for metal. Didn't work there. Black glass. Okay. Glazing. Okay, so that's because it's actually on the same plane. Maybe if I move it up just a notch. There we go. You see, so it's no longer clipping. And that glazing is a little bit too translucent for me. It might be worth playing around with that. But this is looking pretty good. So we've only been playing around with it for a few moments. Get carried away now. Yeah, that looks bad. Okay. Okay, so now we've been playing around with materials, and we have nearly ready to actually export this as a video. Maybe I want to add a few lights in here. So again, I can go to the left-hand column, put in a light. Maybe I'll drop in a point light just to play around and see what things look like. I've got a lot of reflection of this counter front there. And again, it's not giving us a great finish, so fascia is a very high reflectance. It's there, and main body. Alright, and the plinth. Let's just do all of it. So now, hopefully with that reflection, we've got a bit of a better responsive material. And in the session we looked at changing the colour and the intensity. So there's a few ways we can change this. We could go into the intensity here, and we can drop this red, yellow arrow to reset to the default value. Look at that, real-time lighting and shadows is fantastic. And we could change the colour. You know, even if we want a white light, I would always add a little bit of yellow to it. Just to kind of replicate a real light. You know, it's still flipping bright, but that kind of pure whiteness is something that is telltale fake. And we could even go and give that a jazzy colour just to, you know, prove that this is doing it in real time. Looking good. You know, so we can start designing our spaces with this kind of experience. Or we could scroll down a little bit further and we could choose temperature to replicate our light. So use temperature to select on. Now we can have a white light or we can have a warm light. Yeah, and you can basically experience what those different temperatures might be according to your Revit scene. There's a few things for the light that might be worth looking at is the mobility. So one of the first options in the details panel of the light is if it's movable or not. So when it comes to rebuilding the lights, which takes a long time, if we've got a light that might move around the scene, maybe you're experimenting, you know, I would select that to be movable for when you bake it, and that means that the light will automatically affect the materials as we expect as we move it around. Otherwise, if you are just having a static light, for example up here, maybe we could add a rect light and rotate. We can change the width of that light, rotate it again. Okay, and that way we can again change the colour just to give it a bit of warmth. Or I suppose really I could use the temperature, couldn't I? And give that a bit of a warmer feel. Cooler, warmer. Okay, and this is again why we might use that emissive light material, because at the moment it looks like the light is on in the scene, which it is, looking great, but what we don't have is light coming from the object itself. So maybe in another session we can look at building emissive materials. Okay, I'll drop that over here just for the sake of it. Alright, so now I've got these objects in, what I can do is build the lights, build the scene. Looks so good. Look at that. It's like I'm really there. You know, it's all about choosing a high quality material, not going over the top with the lights like I'm doing, choosing high quality assets. Playing around that way. And let's go back over here and see what it looked like to begin with. You know, even the basic stuff looks pretty okay, but you know, yeah, I'd much rather be over here. Right? Alright, nearly built the lights. Wow, even better. Look at that. That's really started to reflect. Oh wow, look at this. Let's take him over here. Yeah, even this guy's a bit more detailed. That is cool. Look at that. Subtle matte reflections on the floor over here. Pretty intense lighting. Now, because this light is set to movable, we're going to get those high quality shadows on all the objects around the scene. Look at that, that is amazing. And as we go around, whereas the non-movable light, stationary, if I was to move that around, Unreal would give approximations as what that light would actually do. So this is really, that's great for working in the viewport, but this is going to be fantastic if we were to animate this light moving around or changing colors over a period of time for a presentation video, for example. This is really exciting. How cool is that? Okay, so now what we need to do is drop in a camera and record how cool this looks. So one thing I could do is I'm going to position the viewport camera to the position I want, and go to the cinematics icon at the top, add a new level sequence, and I'm going to call it kitchen, no spaces, lights, and we get this guy here. First thing I need to do is add a camera, so there's a little camera icon, and you can see we've got a timeline. I can make this timeline bigger by selecting the red icon, red line at the end, make it bigger and longer, or shorter, and I've got my position on the timeline with this, don't know what it's called, this object I can grab and move around, and I've actually got the camera itself. So underneath the camera, in the viewport here, underneath the word perspective, you can see I'm inside the camera. I can eject out of that and move around, and you can see the camera is here. I'm going to change my camera speed of the viewport. And what I'm going to do is I still get a nice little preview here. So normally what I do is kind of pan around the table and go down the corridor, but this kitchen looks so good today, I think I'm going to go down there instead. So here what I'm going to do is rotate the camera to begin with, to there maybe, and we're going to use the sequencer. The sequencer, I'm going to expand the transform within the camera actor, and it is a bit tricky to get used to, but it does have the same traits as animation in After Effects. So once you're kind of used to this kind of process, the skills are transferable and familiar to you. So I'm going to go all the way down the kitchen. I'm going to come behind this column, and then I'm actually going to navigate down the hallway there as well with this light, and I might even try and get the light to follow me. Let's see how that goes. So this guy, I need to move the time along. I need to put a keyframe on the transform in its current position. I need to move the time along, and then I need to move the camera forwards. I'll move it along a bit that way. And I will add a transform. You can see now I've got that line, the path that camera's following. I will add more time to the sequence, move the camera along, and maybe what I want to do here is move the camera along here with a bit of a rotation, and do a transform. And now I want to move that camera down the hallway. So I'll move the time along, I'll move the camera, and I'll add a keyframe. Okay, so now I've got my 3 paths. Maybe at the end there I want to get the camera to do a little spin. And I'll add another keyframe there. So let's see what that looks like. Fantastic. I can scrub through and I can see that camera working its magic down through the kitchen. Now I'm going to try a little thing here, and it might not work, so bear with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get this light to follow the camera along, so we'll get those dynamic shadows. And I think what we have to do here is, let's go to the right place. Let's go to about here, and I can drag in the point light from either the object itself or the point light in the world outliner, and I can drag that in. Fantastic. Let's add a keyframe. I need to add position, so let's go to Light Component, Track, and Transform. So now I've got my transform tools. I'm going to add a keyframe here, and then as the camera moves down, I'm going to move the light as well, and add a keyframe on transform. So now you can see I've got an object that moves with the camera down the scene. I don't know if that's going to make any difference to the camera viewport. Maybe what I could do as well is change the colour as it goes through. So when I get to about the midpoint of that move, I might change the colour to be red, green, blue. So let's add a little bit less red to blue and add that change there. Okay. No, okay, so what it's done is I've got to add the basic colour. So let's whack that all the way up to 1 for full red and add that colour there. So as we go down the scene, look at that, that's super powerful, super cool. Let's see what that looks like in this scene. I need to export this. Now, city camera actor. It doesn't look like that's moving, does it? So I think if I export this, we're only going to see the camera stationary, which is a bit of a pain. What I can do here is add that to, so I selected it and deleted it. I'm going to hover over to the right hand side, this plus icon, choose camera actor. In fact, what I'm going to do is put that to 0, go to camera actor, and now we can see this thing is moving along in that cine actor scene at the top. And am I able to put the point light in there as well? No, let's just undo that and see what happens. Maybe that's something I need to check out for a future sesh. So what I can do now is go to this tiny little render movie icon, this clacker, video sequence AVI, no audio, choose the resolution, let's choose 1080. Let's go to make sure that this is saved in a suitable place. Revit project, saved video captures. Yep, that sounds about right. And then capture movie. Save. Let's make sure we save that out. Let's see how resource heavy this process is. Right, so that's actually not too bad. Alright, bottom right corner, open the capture folder. How cool is that? You can't, oh, I think you could just capture a glimpse of the blue light. Yeah, basically. Well, how amazing is that? Look at that. We've got a whole video sequence going down. These materials look excellent. The reflections look soft and subtle. All on that chrome tap is looking amazing. We've got reflections coming from all over the place. You see, there's the blue coming through on this wall. Fantastic. Look at that detail on that brick. That's the focal point. And I'm very happy with that. Again, we could change a few things if we wanted to. We could go in and change on that cine actor. Oh, where's he gone? There. Okay, so when you want to reopen the cine actor, or the camera, you can click on the level sequence icon, and you can press in the details, open level sequence. We can choose camera actor 1. We could just click on the camera at the top there. No, that's oh, could you? Let's see. No, so he is inside kitchen lights. open level sequence, and what we need to do inside this camera actor, you know, we could go in there, we could change to be 35mm. We could change the aperture, should you wish. You can also do that over here. You could change the aperture. Oh, we've got a viewport. We can change the focal length. We can change the focal distance. So it will really focus in things as it pans around. It's got a nice low number, get everything blurry. We can do that in the actual viewport component, or we could actually change the values over here. You know, we can go into the post process of the camera. We could change the bloom, intensity of those lights in the environment. We can change the exposure here. Have it nice and moody as we go through. We could have a bit of lens flare. A little bit of lens flare. A nice vignette around the space. Color grading, white balance, change that down. Warmer or cooler. You know, so we've got a load of options, even in just the camera itself. I'm going to whack some of these things down to the default. You know, we can increase the shadows, intensity. Don't know how. And then, oh, did that actually add it to the? I thought I saw something move. Yeah, so contrast actually adds that over to the Cine Camera Actor options, so we could increase things inside that Cine Camera itself. Tons of options to start playing around with. I'm getting carried away. We're spending too long on this process. Motion blur we've already looked at. That's quite nice, because when we start moving around, we get things to, yeah, we go in and out of focus. So let's see what that looks like when I export this one. I'm not going to bother saving. Well, you can see the reflection of the blue light flicker in the kitchen space there. Cool. So yeah, if I was to load both of those side by side, if VLC wouldn't be such a stupid piece of software and actually let me do that. So yeah, full exposure control is where it's at. Cool, thank you very much for watching. I'm super excited. It's nice to be able to whiz through these things and do things quite quickly. Don't forget, I've done this about 100 times now on the same scene, adding the same lights, adding the same cameras, and I'm still learning, I'm still experiencing new things and having a great time whilst I do it. So yeah, make sure in your time frame that you've got plenty of opportunity to experiment and have a lot of patience as lights are built, and you should be okay. All right, fantastic guys, good job.